All right, so Hitler and the rise of the Nazis. There's just two questions that I want to focus on as we go through this information today. And the first thing is at the bottom there, you'll see it. What characteristics account for the rise of fascism? And what are the features of a fascist government? So, what I really want to get into with you guys is, what explains why the Nazis rise to power? How are they able to do this? And then once they are in charge, what are the kind of qualities that would define the type of government they have? So we'll just get in real quick by doing a quick review of the Treaty of Versailles. If you guys recall, with war guilt, it was decided by the victorious Allied powers, primarily Britain and France, that Germany was to be blamed entirely for the war. And as a result of having that war guilt clause falling on their heads, so to say, the German military was reduced to 100,000 soldiers. The Rhineland, if you guys recall, that's the borderland that is in Germany but shared alongside of the French border. That was demilitarized, meaning that the French wouldn't have to deal with an armed Germany along their border. Germany was not allowed to have weapons there. The Alsace-Lorraine territory, which Germany had taken from the French in the war they fought against them back in 1870, that was returned back to France. And I think most significantly, the fact that the Germans had to pay for the reparations of the Allies, that is, the cost incurred from fighting the war. That debt fell on the shoulders of Germany. And as you guys recall from page 13 in your pink packets, this leads to hyperinflation because the Germans think that one of the ways they can deal with this is to print money to address some of the economic shortcomings in the country. And what this led to was hyperinflation. Sorry about that. And what we see with hyperinflation is bread prices rising, to 201 billion marks in November of 1923, and egg prices rising to 320 billion marks in November of 1923, when, if you recall, back in 1914, they cost less than 1 mark. So this kind of economic disorder and chaos creates a lot of despair in the country. Now, I'm going to play a video clip for you, and it's, you're watching a video, and this is a video of a video, so the quality's probably not that great. But if you see in the top left corner, it says Third Reich, The Rise, 1 of 6. I'm going to play for you guys 4 minutes and 20 seconds to 7 minutes and 20 seconds. So if you want to see this on your own, you could certainly take a look. But as you watch the video, whether it's here or on YouTube elsewhere, I just want you to focus on the question below that says, what conditions in Germany would make a totalitarian leader so appealing? So let's play this, and I'll kind of hit at some things answering that question below.
There had once been another war. And another German defeat.
The end of the war meant husbands restored to wives and life restored to men. But there was no sense of joy, only defeat, anxiety, senseless gunfights, confusion.
If you were German in 1919, your peace was humiliation and suffering. Enforced democracy had resulted in chaos. Money was worthless. Vigilantes ruled the streets. Berlin had become a swamp of depravity. Everything and everyone was for sale. The atmosphere has become revolutionary.
apocalyptic. Not only money, but all standards have lost their value. Saviors have appeared everywhere, declaring that they've been sent by God to save the world.
Mystics, magicians, and religious fanatics drew followers desperate for rescue. Each was called a Heiland, or savior. But in German, there is no plural word for savior. There can be only one.
In Munich, there is a corporal who has been causing trouble. They say he has an almost hypnotic power.
All right, so let's get into what are these conditions that are going to make a guy like Hitler so appealing. So the first thing to understand is the sense of humiliation that kind of defines Germany after World War I. You're talking about a country that's built up off of its military reputation, and so for them to lose World War I when the public was convinced that they weren't losing the war at all in any sense of the word, and to sign this Treaty of Versailles is just a really embarrassing defeat that the Germans are having a very hard time swallowing. Germany is very chaotic after the Treaty of Versailles is signed. You have people looking in lots of different directions for an answer to their problems, and the German Workers' Party, which becomes the Nazi Party, is one group that claims they have a set of answers, but also the communists of Germany claim that they have the answers to the problems, and these two groups are literally fighting it out with guns in the streets of Berlin, in the streets of Munich, and it is an extremely unstable situation throughout the country. You have corruption in the country, democratically elected officials who, at least the public perceives, not really looking out for the interests of the people themselves, and people are kind of frustrated with the political situation, and that kind of leads into the next one. Germany is brand new to democracy. This is not something that is a part of their society the way that it is for America. And there's a lot of people who believe that the answers to Germany's problems do not lie with democracy. Democracy creates, in their opinion, too much disagreement, too many different parties. Germany had something like 30 different political parties in the country at this point, and people just don't see democracy as being the way out. Some people, at least. And also, they're desperate. You've seen the economic situation. People are jobless in the millions. People are struggling financially to keep their heads above water, and they're looking desperately for a solution. So when you see images like this, and notice, I'm not even talking about Hitler's message, just his images. As you look at that question, I'll kind of pause for a minute to let you consider. But when I look at this picture, I see strength, I see composure, I see someone with a vision, I see someone who is organized, I see someone who is determined, I see someone who is powerful, and I see these things, and there's a lot of different reasons I see these things. Whether it's him looking away from the camera kind of shooting from beneath him, looking up at him, him looking past the camera as if he's got his attention elsewhere. You kind of see the same thing in these pictures. And if you're living in such a chaotic and depressed and humiliated and frustrated nation like Germany, and you see this guy who looks put together, who looks focused, who, I don't think you're wrong for saying, who maybe even looks a little bit angry, the Germans are going to find common ground in that. And so these are the reasons why these types of photos, notice, just the photos, I'm not even talking about Hitler's ideology, just the images of him are going to maybe start to generate some inspiration. Let's not fool ourselves and pretend like the Nazis are, the world's most popular party, let alone even Germany's most popular party. A lot of people, when they heard Hitler and saw him speak, they thought he was ridiculous and couldn't believe why anyone would support him. But a lot of Germans were starting to grow interested in the Nazi message as of the early 1930s. So I'll let this clip play, and I want you guys to pay attention in this clip to how Hitler is building up self-esteem in the German people. Remember, they're frustrated, they're humiliated, they are embarrassed, they are desperate. So just pay attention to what Hitler's kind of trying to do here to give the Germans a stronger belief in themselves and to create this sense of power amongst his people.
On February 10th, Hitler makes his first speech as Chancellor in Berlin.
Unser Führer, der Weltkanzler Adolf Hitler, hat das Wort. Dieses Jahres wurde die neue Regierung der nationalen Konzentration gewählt. Ich und damit die nationalsozialistische Bewegung tragen gegen sie ein. Ich glaube, dass nunmehr die Voraussetzungen erreicht sind, um die ich das vergangene Jahr gekämpft habe. Wir wollen nicht leben, wollen nicht spenden. Ich hoffe, ich habe den Fall abgelehnt, jeweils vor dieses Volk hinzutreten und billige Versprechungen zu nehmen. In uns selbst allein liegt die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes. Wenn wir selbst dieses deutsche Volk emporführen und eigene Arbeit und eigenen Fleiß, eigene Entschlossenheit, eigenen Trotz, eigene Beharrlichkeit, dann werden wir wieder emporsteigen, genau wie die Väter einst auch Deutschland nicht des Selbst hielt, sondern selbst geschaffen. Deutsches Volk, die uns 4 Jahre. Und ich schwöre hier, so wie wir und so wie ich in dieses Amt eintrat, so will ich das gehen. Ich tat es nicht um Gehalt und nicht um Lohn. Ich tat es um deine Selbstbildung.
So, what you see there is Hitler obviously sounding angry. Let's call a spade a spade. But also recognizing that the German people feel that common sense of anger with Hitler. His pausing for dramatic effect, his gesturing, all that stuff conveys these emotions that the German people are going to find common ground with. But I think more than that, I think most importantly, is the words he's using to create this sense of power. If you guys looked on page 15 at your notes here, it's a different speech, but at the top where it says Hitler's speeches, you just see him trying to kind of talk about the idea that there's this rare opportunity that they have in history, this one moment that if they just grab it and take it, they will send Germany on a far different trajectory than they could have ever experienced. And a common word or common words that you may have overlooked in that speech, but don't overlook them, are words like we and us and our. Hitler's using this kind of movement to say, this is not about me. I'm doing this for the German people. This is for the benefit of our society. And that's going to gravitate or generate popularity among the people when they see, here is this guy trying to get us to realize that there is a strength that lies within this national identity that we have. And we need to embrace that. So, all that to say, kind of just background for you. I know 15 minutes worth of background, but it's really important to understand how Hitler cultivates an image in words and in pictures to generate support without even really saying a whole lot in terms of policy or ideology or his beliefs. There's a lot that gets him support without even having to say all too much in terms of specifics. So, now, how do we get here? It's going to begin with after World War I, when Germany's government is going to be this democracy called the Weimar Republic. And the Weimar Republic is going to be seen as the reason Germany is suffering. Hitler will often blame them for conspiring against the German people and basically rolling over and giving up to the Western powers and just handing over Germany's sense of pride by allowing all of those terms of the Treaty of Versailles just to fall on the head of the Germans without any kind of protest or fight back. And they're the ones responsible for the economic policies that lead to hyperinflation. And so a lot of people, not just the Nazis, a lot of people in Germany become disillusioned with democracy and say, there's got to be a way forward that isn't necessarily going to be with the Weimar Republic. So in the 1920s, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which becomes the Nazi Party, is going to start to grow a little bit. I got to emphasize that to you guys. A little bit of a following in the 1920s. They're really popular in southern Germany, which is the more conservative, traditional heartland of the country that believes kind of in Germans' mythical past, in their older, much older history. And that's where the Nazi Party's roots are going to be. And what the Nazi Party is going to be, with the leader of Adolf Hitler, is going to believe in the growth of what's deemed to be the Aryan race, which is a race that's kind of idealized by Adolf Hitler. And it's seen as being all through history, this Aryan race has been the one that has driven forth the most progress and been the most successful in all time. And Hitler kind of points back and says, any failure amongst these people, whether it's the Roman Empire or any of the medieval larger empires, he's going to say it's when they start to mix their blood with the impure races. That's where things fall apart. And obviously there's nothing to this theory that makes any sense to us in modern times, but back in his time, there was thought to be a lot of character that was determined in race. It wasn't just skin tone and body structure or whatever. It was thought to be intellect. It was thought to be physical strength. It was thought to be principles of behavior, kind of the stuff you guys saw in that World War I video we watched, describing African races and Indian races. That definitely works for white people just as well. And these people are extreme nationalists. They believe that if Germany can just get the most perfect and most racially pure people to breed more, then this country will be more successful. It will be on a much better trajectory. And they blame a lot of Germany's problems on the Weimar Republic, but they also go on saying that the Weimar Republic is manipulated and run by the Jewish people who are undermining Germany. So the Nazis very slowly are rising in popularity in southern Germany. And Hitler gets to the point where in 1923, he thinks he has his moment where he can stage his overthrow of the Weimar Republic in what's known as the Beer Hall Putsch. And this is where he basically is going to take his paramilitary force and he is going to say, now is our moment where we will rise up against the police, we will rise up against the state, and we will overthrow the government. And needless to say, they leave this beer hall, move out into the streets of Munich, where they run in to the police forces, and the putsch is taken down very quickly. Hitler's life obviously is spared, but other Nazi members are not so lucky. Some are killed in the fight. And Hitler is arrested. He's imprisoned and arrested as a result of this. And so Hitler's in jail for a little bit over a year. And in that time, he is going to really start to inform his ideology, develop his ideology, and not just be this rabble-rouser speech giver, but be a guy who he thinks has a vision for what Germany can be. And that vision is going to be put forth in this book that becomes known as Mein Kampf, meaning My Struggle. And this book sells okay, not all that widely, in its earlier years. And as the economic situation really starts to decline and really starts to worsen, it's going to become more and more popular. And in 1929, the Great Depression strikes in America. But its effects are felt globally. And one of its biggest effects is going to be that American banks, who are struggling to keep their financial situation afloat, are basically forced to recall their loans. If they had given money to foreign governments or to people, hoping that those people would pay them back, they basically can't keep that risk out there anymore. They have to basically get the money back. And they do that to the German government, who used loans as a way to start to address their repayments in debt after World War I and getting the German economy back on the right track. So the Great Depression is really going to complicate things for the German people, and it's also going to lead to the Nazis even further growing in more and more popularity. So by 1932, 1933, the Nazis have been elected to become the majority party in what's known as the Reichstag. And you can see down there, the Reichstag is Germany's parliament. And in order to form a government that can proceed forth with policies and an agenda that has a vision and can get things done in Germany, Germany's president is forced to appoint Hitler to the position of chancellor. And Hitler is going to become basically the second in command of Germany. Now, there is a parliament, there are political parties that don't agree with the Nazis, so Hitler does not have full power over the country yet. But every bit of power that he has, he's obtained through illegal means. So in 1933, there is an act that is put forth called the Enabling Act, which is going to give Hitler the ability to override any kind of constitutional law that sets to limit his power, or limit his authority. And we'll get back to that in a little bit here, this Enabling Act. As the Nazis are coming to power, there's a couple of different ways that they are able to enforce and to use their power. So these three things don't all necessarily coexist all throughout the Nazi reign over Germany, but at different stages and at different points throughout their time, both as rising to power, and once they're in power, they'll use these three different institutions. And the first of which is called the SA, or the Stormtroopers. These are the guys who in the early 1930s, as Hitler's coming to power, they're the ones who are at the party rallies in full uniforms, wearing the Nazi armbands, and they're dressed like they're soldiers. You have to realize they are not official German soldiers. Remember, Germany's army is reduced down to 100,000 men. So these stormtroopers are literally, like it says in this PowerPoint, they are the military force of the Nazi Party, not the military force of Germany. And they will fight. They will get into fights in the streets, especially with communists, and they will use a means of intimidation to help Hitler to come to further and further power. They will face some issues down the road, and we'll talk about those. Once Hitler gets into power, he's going to start relying on the SS more, the Schutzstaffel. And these are the guard squadrons for Hitler. And there's a lot of different things that the SS is going to do. The SS will be fighting in World War II, but the SS initially is going to be there to help maintain order and protect Hitler. But as time goes on, as you see there, They are going to help run the police forces throughout Germany. They will be the ones administering on the higher ends the running and administration of the concentration camps. In Eastern Europe, before the final solution comes forth, they'll be the ones managing the execution squads that will take entire towns and villages full of Jewish people or other groups and executing them. They will be administering the death camps. And the secret police, the Gestapo, is a function of the SS, and they're going to be used to help investigate any kind of activity meant to undermine Hitler's power. They will be informed by citizens all throughout Germany. They will be used to assault Germans in public. They will be used to keep the German people in this constant state of discomfort that will ultimately keep them in line. So going back to how Hitler is going to gain total power, I emphasized to you guys earlier on, violence is a part of the Nazis, but violence is not a part of how Hitler comes to gain total power. If he would have been successful in the beer hall putsch, we're talking about a different story. But with Hitler coming to power as the chancellor in 1933, like I said earlier, that is entirely legal. And the way that Hitler is able to push through this Enabling Act, in case you were wondering, how did the Germans just roll over and let him pass this Enabling Act? How it happens is there's a fire in the German parliament in 1933, in the spring of 1933. And this is known as the Reichstag fire. It's never been clearly established who is to blame for this fire. But who gets blamed is the second largest political party in Germany. That is the Communists. And so the Nazis will use this opportunity as a way to say, if you want Germany protected from the potential threat of a communist revolution, communist overthrow of the government, then power, supreme power, needs to be granted to the Nazis in order for them to be able to protect the German people from this communist threat. And this is what's going to allow Hitler to start to send his opponents into these concentration camps so that they are able to be monitored, and obviously later on as the final solution starts to come about, potentially executed as a means to carry out the Nazi agenda. Hitler also, once he gets into power and starts to get total power, is going to purge rivals within his own party. He runs into a situation with the SA, the stormtroopers, where he has to decide, as they start to gain more and more power, it starts to threaten the military, and it starts to threaten the SS. And Hitler has to come to a decision where he is going to determine one evening, it's called the Night of the Long Knives, where he is going to kill prominent members of the Nazis and replace them with the SS as being his military force, as opposed to the SA who had come up with him as the party was beginning in the 1920s. Once the man who appointed Hitler to chancellor, that's President Hindenburg, passes away, Hitler is going to eliminate the office of president, and he will be in complete control of the nation. So this allows him to then enforce his ideology. This allows him to really focus on building up this Aryan Empire. Potentially later on furthering the German hope for what's called Lebensraum, which means living space for the Aryan people. Give them more land to live on so they can be as successful as possible. He wants to create this Third Reich, this third great empire, with the Holy Roman Empire being the First Reich and the Second Reich being Otto von Bismarck's German Empire. This will be the Third Reich. He says it will last 1,000 years. And he believes it will last for 1,000 years because the inferior people who have given the Germans a hard time along the way, the Jews and the Gypsies and the Slavs, they will be done away with. He plans on kind of starting to create this reality by indoctrinating young men, boys for that matter, in his group called the Hitler Youth. And they're going to be given this heavy dose of racism that's going to define how they view the outside world. So he's able to start really carrying this out. In September of 1935, he creates what's called the Nuremberg Laws, which is going to define exactly who is Jewish and what makes you Jewish and how many generations do we have to go back and how many Jewish grandparents do you need. in order to be considered Jewish. And these Jews will be excluded from German citizenship. They'll be forced to wear the Yellow Star of David. And it leads into further acts, like in November of 1938, when Kristallnacht happens, which is known as the Night of Broken Glass, in response to the assassination of a German official at the hands of a Jewish man. Retribution is kind of sought out all throughout Germany, and Jewish businesses, Jewish synagogues are destroyed on this one night. 30,000 are sent to concentration camps, and Jews are going to begin to flee out of Germany as quickly as they possibly can. So that's really it. Obviously, there's a lot more to be said about Hitler, but again, what we're trying to focus on here is how did he come to power, and once he was in power, how did he enforce and carry out his rule? So just as a parting thing, something I need you guys to consider is what it says on the board here. And that is, what are 3 events that you think are most important in understanding how Hitler developed a totalitarian government? If you were to look back on what we talked about, what do you think are kind of the 3 pivotal moments that contribute to him taking full charge of the country? So that's all I have for you. If you guys have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, this is where your notes conclude. Thanks.